All right, welcome to today's Tech Talk Tuesday. And for today's discussion, we're going to be talking about long tube headers for your classic Mopars. So when it comes to long tube headers, there are basically two types of headers out there. Your cheap ones and your expensive ones. Now, there's a ton of different manufacturers out there that make both cheap ones and the expensive ones. On the cheap end, you've got ones like the ones from Mopar, Dynamax, Hooker headers. From the expensive side, you've also got the Hooker Super Comp headers, your TTI exhaust headers, as well as your Doug's headers like the ones that I'm running here on my Challenger. So now, while there are a variety of differences between the two, like tube thickness and flange thicknesses and coatings on them, the real big difference between the cheap headers and the expensive headers is actually how the headers are routed and what type of options you can have on the car that they clear. So for example, there's certain ones out there that if you have a column shift automatic, or if you have power steering, or if you have a 4-speed, you can't run these types of headers because they just aren't routed properly. Now, I've done both. I've had the cheap Dynamax muff headers on mine, and I've also had the Doug's on there now, and it is a night and day difference, and it's worth every penny to spend the extra money to buy the high quality headers. Now, one of the big things is with the cheaper headers, what they do is you actually have to disconnect the steering linkage in order to run the cross link in between a couple of the tubes on the headers. And as a result, the headers hang down really low. And unfortunately, you tend to run over things like speed bumps, you drag on those, certain driveways, and there's a lot of things that you run into problems with because you lose so much ground clearance by these headers hanging down so low underneath the front of the car. And it becomes a real nightmare, and I can't tell you how many times I dented up the cheap headers on that car just because they hung down so far. Now, there are some drawbacks to the expensive headers, and like the Doug's headers I've got, you can't run the stock starter anymore because they tuck the headers up so much closer into the engine bay that the stock starter is just too large, and you have to convert to a high torque mini starter, which isn't the end of the world. I mean, the high torque mini starters are definitely a superior starter over to the factory ones. And if you're putting headers on the car, you really don't care about stock appearance anymore anyways. It's just something you need to be aware of, that you do need to go ahead and order a high torque mini starter if you don't already have one, if you're putting on the expensive type headers like your Doug's, TTIs, and your Hooker Super Comps. I found that out the hard way because I had the cheap headers on there, and the stock starter cleared just fine, but as soon as I went to put the new headers on, I discovered the new starter wouldn't fit, or the OEM starter wouldn't fit, so I had to go and order a high torque mini starter, and it just delayed the project a couple days. But in the end, it was no big deal because the new starter went right in, wired right up with the stock harness, everything was great. And so I definitely recommend, personally, I've had great experience with the Doug's headers. TTIs and the Hooker Super Comps are also great headers, and they clear really well. As long as you just gotta make sure your mounts are good and for your engine and your transmission, and everything lines up and they go right in. The installation was such a breeze with the new Doug headers over the old cheap headers that I was running. When I had the old headers, to put them in and then take them out, you had to jack the engine way up, you had to go ahead and disconnect the steering linkage. It was a huge hassle, and it took a lot of effort. Where the higher quality headers, they go right in, and the ground clearance you pick up is a huge difference. We're talking like 3 or 4 inches of ground clearance difference just because everything's tucked up closer. And so if you're in the market for headers for your Mopar, I definitely recommend just save up the extra money, go with the higher quality headers, because in the long run, both in installation and clearance when you're out driving around, it's worth every penny spending the extra money to go ahead and get the higher quality headers. Now, one thing to note, that if you're going with upgrading your whole exhaust system, if you're looking at ordering like a kit, check if you're going to order from like TTI. You need to make sure what headers they are compatible with. Like, they didn't offer a kit that was lined up exactly with my Doug's headers, so I bought the Doug's headers before I had upgrade the exhaust system. And so I had to go ahead and do custom tubing on, even from their kit, to be able to mate up to the Hooker, or to the header collectors. So just something else to keep in mind. If you're gonna go and order a TTI exhaust system, but you're not gonna use their headers, you may have to do some custom fab work to get the headers to connect to their exhaust system, or you can just order their complete kit and covers everything from headers all the way out to the tips. and then you're all set in one shot. Now, of course, TTI is going to be at the high end for your expense, but they offer some amazing headers, and the quality on them is just top-notch quality, and the coatings they offer just work really well. So you can't go wrong with the TTIs. I got the Dugs on mine because I was able to found a huge sale on them at the time and got them at a great price, and so I couldn't pass that up. But any one of those, you can't go wrong with any of the high quality headers out there. Well, I know there's a lot of people out there in the classic Mopar world that are racking their head against the wall about what headers to go with. Hopefully this help narrows it down for you as well. So of course my experience is primarily with the small blocks on the Mopars, but the companies like TTI and Hooker Supercomps do make headers for the big blocks that also are routed better to help with your clearances. So just got to go ahead and check out there, but when you're looking at your headers, you definitely don't want to skimp out there for a lot of reasons. For ground clearance and installation, like I mentioned, those are huge factors. You're maybe saving a couple $100 on your headers up front, but the aggravation and pain you're going to have down the road, it more than justifies the extra cost. So I hope you found this video helpful and useful. And as always, if you did, go ahead and smash that like button, give us a thumbs up. And if you want to be kept up to date of all of my future videos that I upload, go ahead and smash that subscribe button down below. And don't forget to ring the notification bell as well, so that way YouTube will notify you of all of my uploads in the future. And as always, I will see you the next video.